Most of the world knows John Travolta as the man who can't be stopped, the dancing king, the pilot, the comeback legend with the $1 million smile. But when the cameras stop rolling, there is a shadow that contradicts everything you think you know about his life. While we were watching the icon, the man himself was living through a reality so dark it feels scripted by a cruel writer. It wasn't a single tragedy, it was a mathematical impossibility. A pattern that kept returning, wearing the same devastating mask. 3 women. 3 different decades. One single enemy, breast cancer. It visited him at 23. It returned at 24. It came back for him at 66. And in the middle of that cycle, an even darker tragedy took his son. Most human beings would break after the first loss. John Travolta endured 4. The question isn't why tragedy chose him. The question is, how is he still standing? How do you keep dancing when the universe seems determined to break your legs? Welcome to the untold story of John Travolta. This isn't just a biography. This is an investigation into the architecture of survival. This is how you live when the sky falls. To understand the man, we have to go back to the moment the first crack appeared. The year is 1976. The setting is the backlot of a television movie called The Boy in the Plastic Bubble. John is 23 years old. He is raw energy. He is on the verge of superstardom with Saturday Night Fever already in pre-production. He walks onto the set feeling invincible, as most 2-3-year-olds do, but waiting for him there isn't just a co-star, it's a force of nature. Her name is Diana Hyland. She is 41, 18 years his senior. She plays his mother in the film, a detail that the tabloids would later obsess over, but on set, the chemistry is undeniable. It isn't the chemistry of a mother and son. It is the magnetic pull of 2 souls recognizing each other. Crew members later describe seeing them huddled in corners between takes, talking for hours. John would later say it was like being struck by something cosmic. He had dated before, sure. But this was different. Diana was accomplished, graceful, and possessed a wisdom that grounded John's frantic energy. They begin planning a life. Not a fling, a life. They look at houses in the Hollywood Hills. They talk about marriage. For a brief, shining moment, the timeline of John Travolta's life looks perfect. But destiny has a way of hiding the fine print. Diana had a secret. A few years prior, she had undergone a mastectomy. She believed she had beaten breast cancer. She believed she was safe. And when she looked at John, she allowed herself to believe in a future where illness didn't exist. But the silence of cancer is deceptive. While John was rehearsing the dance steps that would make him a global legend, the cells in Diana's body were silently rewriting their future. The decline wasn't gradual. It was a cliff. One day they are planning a wedding. The next, she is bedridden. The cancer had returned, aggressive and irreversible. Friends familiar with the situation say Diana didn't realize the end was near until 2 weeks before she died. 2 weeks. 14 days to say goodbye to the love of your life. John walked away from the set of Saturday Night Fever. The studio pressure, the fame, the money, none of it mattered. He flew to her side. He sat in that sterilized room, listening to the hum of machines, holding the hand of the woman who was supposed to be his future. On the 27th of March, 1977, Diana Hyland died in John Travolta's arms. He felt her final breath. He was 23 years old. The world saw Saturday Night Fever and saw a cocky, strutting king of the disco. But look closer at his eyes in that film. That isn't just acting. That is a man trying to outrun a ghost. This was the first fracture. And he had no idea that the pattern was only just beginning. Grief is a heavy coat. You wear it, you sleep in it, you wake up and it's still there. For the next 18 months, John wore that coat every single day. He was the biggest star on the planet, but inside, he was hollow. He told himself he had survived the worst. He thought, surely the universe has filled its quota of pain for one life. But the universe wasn't done. Enter Helen Travolta. Helen wasn't just John's mother. She was the architect of his soul. A former actress and singer herself, she was the one who filled the Travolta home in New Jersey with music, with drama, with the belief that a working-class kid could touch the stars. She was his protector. And because she was his protector, she did something that is both beautiful and devastating. She lied to him. When Helen began feeling the symptoms, she knew what it was. She recognized the enemy. It was the same shadow that had just taken Diana. But she looked at her youngest son still grieving, still fragile, and she decided she couldn't break him again. Not yet. So she hid the diagnosis. She suffered in silence to buy him a few more months of peace. But secrets cannot hold back biology. By the time John found out, it was too late. The cancer was terminal. History was repeating itself with terrifying precision. Less than 2 years after holding Diana, John found himself back in a sick room. But this time, the dynamic was different. He didn't just sit there. He performed. Witnesses described John sitting by his mother's bed, singing quiet songs, acting out little scenes, doing anything to bring a flicker of light into her fading consciousness. It was his final gift to her, the talent she had nurtured, now used to ease her passage out of this world. On the 3rd of December, 1978, Helen Travolta passed away. She was 66. 2 women, 18 months apart, the same disease. The Travolta pattern had been established, and the weight of it crushed his career. The 80 seconds rolled in, and John's star plummeted. The critics said he was washed up. They said he was a one-hit wonder. They didn't understand that he wasn't just losing his career. He was trying to figure out who he was without the 2 women who had defined him. He was walking underwater. For a decade, John drifted. He made bad movies. He turned down good ones. He was a ghost haunting Hollywood. But even in a Greek tragedy, there is an intermission, a moment where the sun breaks through the clouds, a screen test for a forgettable comedy called The Experts. Walks in Kelly Preston. She is light. She is effervescent. She is everything John's life hasn't been for 10 years. She doesn't carry the heavy, tragic energy of the past. She carries the future. Their love wasn't the lightning strike he had with Diana. It was a slow burn. It was a friendship that caught fire. Kelly grounded him. She healed the parts of him that he thought were permanently broken. They married in Paris in 1991. A midnight ceremony. A fresh start. And as if the universe finally decided to reward him, his career caught fire at the exact same moment. Pulp Fiction. Quentin Tarantino. The comeback of the century. Suddenly, John Travolta is back on top. He has the Oscar nomination. He has the fame. But more importantly, he has a family. Jett is born in 1992. Ella Blue follows in 2000. The fractures seem to be healing. The glue is holding. But if you look closely at the architecture of his life, the foundation was still trembling. John adored his son, Jett. Jett was autistic and suffered from Kawasaki disease and seizures. John and Kelly built a fortress around the boy. 2 nannies, monitors, alarms on the doors. They knew Jett was fragile. They dedicated every waking hour to keeping him safe. But you cannot build a wall high enough to keep out fate. The morning of the 2nd of January 2009, the old Bahama Bay Hotel, Fawfaz 4 cell. It was supposed to be a New Year's celebration. A sanctuary. 10 a.m. A nanny rushes down the hallway. The words are garbled, panic-stricken. Jett. Bathroom. Not breathing. John runs. He bursts into the bathroom. His son, his firstborn, his joy, lying on the cold tile. John drops to his knees. He begins CPR. The desperation in that room is something no camera could capture and no script could describe. A father pleading with God, pumping the chest of his 6-year-old boy. Come back. Come on, Jett. Come back. But some doors, once closed, do not open again. Jett Travolta was pronounced dead at the hospital. A seizure. A fall. A fatal blow. We talk about the Travolta curse, but this was different. Losing a parent is nature. Losing a spouse is a tragedy. Losing a child is an amputation. John described the aftermath as a silence that wasn't human. He said he didn't know if he would wake up the next morning or if he even wanted to. And yet, the world wouldn't let him grieve in peace. This is the part of the story that makes your blood boil. While John was burying his son, an ambulance driver and a former politician allegedly tried to extort him. They demanded $25 million, threatening to release sensitive details about Jett's treatment. Imagine the cruelty. You are holding your dead son, and wolves are already circling, trying to monetize your heartbreak. John had to testify. He had to relive the worst moment of his life in a courtroom while the flashbulbs popped. Eventually, the stress was so overwhelming he dropped the case. He chose peace over justice. The first fracture from 1977 had become a canyon. The years following Jett's death were a blur. John and Kelly held on to each other because they were the only ones who understood the magnitude of the hole in their lives. They had a new son, Benjamin, who brought a renewed spirit to the house. They were surviving. But the pattern was waiting. And a man, the diagnosis comes back. Breast cancer. Imagine being John Travolta in that doctor's office, hearing those words. Again, seeing the woman you love, the mother of your children, facing the exact same enemy that took your first love and your mother. It is a psychological torture that is almost impossible to comprehend. But this time, they made a choice. Kelly decided to fight in the dark. No press releases, no magazine covers about my cancer battle. She wanted normalcy for Benjamin and Ella. She wanted her final years to be about living, not about being a patient. For 2 years, John lived a double life. In public, he smiled. He walked red carpets. He posted on Instagram. Works for an is person idios. In private, he was back in that familiar room. The smell of disinfectant, the hush of the nurses, the slow, agonizing countdown. He knew the rhythm of this song. He had danced to it twice before. The 12th of July, 2020. Kelly Preston dies. She was 57. The pattern was complete. The tragedy had come full circle. John was left alone in a house that was now quieter than it had ever been. After Kelly died, John vanished. He didn't want the world's pity. He famously said, "I felt saturated with everyone else's sadness. It was like two boats sinking together." He needed to find a place where only his grief existed. But the turning point didn't come from a therapist or a priest. It came from a 10-year-old boy. One night, while putting Benjamin to bed, the little boy looked at his father, this giant of a man who seemed to be crumbling, and asked a question that cut through the noise. "Dad, because Mom died, are you going to die too?" It was a moment of terror. John realized that his son wasn't just grieving, he was terrified. He was waiting for the other shoe to drop. John took a breath, and he told the truth. He didn't promise forever. He didn't lie. He said, "Ben, nobody knows when they're going to go. Your brother left at 16, too young. Your mom left at 57, too young. But I could die tomorrow. Or I could live to be 100. The truth is, we don't know. So we have to live now." That conversation woke him up. He realized he couldn't just survive for his children. He had to live for them. He had to show them that joy was still possible, even in a house filled with ghosts. Paris, the same city where he married Kelly 33 years earlier. John takes Ella to the Olympics. And the photos that surface stop people in their tracks. Look at him. He isn't hiding. He isn't wearing the mask of the grieving widower. He is smiling. A real, genuine smile that reaches his eyes. He's flying planes again, his church in the sky. He's dancing with his daughter in videos. He's taking Benjamin on adventures. He isn't moving on. You never move on from love like that. He is moving forward. He posts tributes to Kelly on her birthday. He talks to Jett in his prayers. He carries them with him, not as anchors that drag him down, but as co-pilots. He proved that grief doesn't have to be a life sentence. It can be a fuel. John Travolta's story teaches us a brutal but beautiful truth. Grief is individual. It is messy. And it is the price we pay for love. John figured out that you cannot tie your sinking boat to someone else's. You have to patch your own hull first. I want to ask you a question, and I want you to be honest in the comments below. Have you ever felt like John? Have you ever felt like the universe was targeting you with a pattern you couldn't escape? How did you find the strength to stand up one more time? Your story might help someone else reading the comments today. At 71 years old, John Travolta is still here. The camera is still rolling. The noise has faded, but the music hasn't stopped. He has survived the first fracture. He survived the second. He survived the collapse of his world. And he stands today not as a victim of tragedy, but as a master of survival. They say tragedy defines character. If that's true, then John Travolta is the strongest character Hollywood has ever produced. Because after everything, he is still dancing.